Hey there, guys. So today I want to go over why it's important to have characters on screen that represent us. And I think this is a very important topic to really think about when it comes to sort of the understanding of really, you know, having a sort of representation in a visibility of that person who is very similar to you as a character on screen. And what I mean, of course, is by media, how LGBTQ people are portrayed in media and how it does impact you in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned, there's been quite a bit of shows and movies that I watched whenever I was, coming to terms with myself. And when you are younger, especially when you're younger, and you see those sort of images and representation, it does help you to find that sort of relatable connection to that character and gives you, you know, hope that there are other, people out there that have those same struggles and issues. Yes, that may be a character on screen, but it is still showing that struggle and that issue of identity. Of course, the first show to actually, well, not the first show, or the show that has done it here recently, of course, has been Heated Rivalry. That show, you know, coming to, watching it now, I feel like that show was so timely to my current situation at the moment, and coming again, like coming out within the past few months, it was so timely and it so much resonated with me in so many different ways because of the different dynamics in the characters and how the characters, have to hide themselves. That is a constant struggle when you are somebody who is, LGBTQ plus. You constantly have to deal with that struggle day in and day out. And especially if you're in an environment that, you know, you're not as able to be open and honest, then that's what's going to really prevent you from being able to share your story, if that makes sense. So I think it's important that we have these stories, especially for somebody, again, if you don't have that around you, if you don't have, a sort of support system or a group of people that you can go to. And like, somebody who lives, in the South, I mean, it's the same sort of thing where when you're able to see those, representations on screen, it helps you to be relatable and it helps you to not feel alone. And I think multiple times that has happened with me throughout my journey because, like what I've mentioned, when I shared about music and, of course, some of the movies that I have, those stories make an impact on you and really give you, a sense of ease and a sense of peace. And again, I think Heated Rivalry is the best example, here recently. One of the other examples that I think has really been a really great sort of just completely in line with my journey has been Queer as Folk. So that show came out, I want to say it was around 2001. I'm pretty sure that that show came out. And there's a lot of people that are very aware of this show. Um, so one of the big things with this show is that it shows and it sort of represents, you know, what it's like to have a group of friends and to have that sort of sense of, being ourselves around our friends. And not only that, it goes into a lot of real topics. Like when you have, like the younger character Justin, where he's the youngest one in the group, and he's also one that's really unapologetic about himself, even though he gets bullied, he gets picked on, He's really, unapologetic about who he is. And so, again, especially when you have somebody, especially like a younger character like that, and you see sort of them standing up, you see them really being, open with themselves and really being, true to themselves, it does give you, okay, I can relate to this character. And when you relate to that character, again, it does inspire you in a lot of ways. That's like when I watched the show here recently. I've seen the show before and I've watched, multiple episodes of the show. But one thing, it's so crazy because the show has been out for years. Like, again, it came out in like 2001. So it's crazy that when I had went back and watched the show here recently, it was just as much relevant, with a lot of the topics that it discussed as it is to today. So the thing that really hit me when I had watched it recently, and I had shared this with a friend too, is that I've been watching the first season. Because usually when I try to get back into watching the show again, I always start from the beginning and go through the seasons. And what I noticed with this particular episode is that it was so much in line with a lot of the experiences that I've went through. And one thing I think that, again, in this episode, it was like episode 13 and 14, I believe, of the first season of Queer as Folk. And the character Emmett, which is, of course, one of the characters, he's a little bit more, flamboyant in a lot of ways. And he's a character that, again, he's an unapologetic character, as, a gay man. Like, he's unapologetic. A lot of the characters in that show are. And again, it's a great representation of, having a strong-willed set of characters that you can relate to and you can see yourself as like being friends with them. You can see yourself in those scenarios in a lot of ways. And so the one thing with Emmett is in this particular episode, he sort of had a lot of, struggles mentally. And you could kind of tell in this particular episode that he was like having a lot of doubts with everything and having a lot of doubts with himself. And so what he did was go to like a group therapy. And in this group therapy, this was basically for supposedly any former, gays and lesbians that were in the group. And so what he's trying to do is change himself. And again, this is very relatable to a lot of LGBTQ people, is that with our society, even our society today, like I said, this is still relevant to today because it still happens. And I think it's even kind of worse here recently over the past few years. And so people feel like, if you're somebody who's gay, you feel like you have to change to more align with society, and you feel like you can't be yourself. And you get caught up in a lot of this sort of, you know, brainwashing in a sense to where you have to align with the rest of what society wants you to be and what they really expect of you. You want to be, again, this is again very similar to my story in a lot of ways with what I went through. And his story was so much like so close to my experiences. And another thing too is that he tried to, live as a straight man, but it's not working for him. It doesn't come natural to him. And again, this kind of goes back to what I discussed in another video, where a lot of people don't understand is that your attractions they naturally happen in a certain way. You're naturally attracted to a specific kind of person, and it's not something that is altered. It is not something that is changed. It is inherently who you are. And so, like I said, why this is relatable in so many ways is that a lot of us, especially when you're somebody who lives in the South, you are constantly bombarded with this idea that you can change and you can do this and you can do that. But what happens is when we do that, it suppresses a lot of ourselves. And so it becomes a problem down the road. And it becomes something that really becomes an issue. And that's why you have a lot of people who may be LGBTQ who have mental health issues because there is a constant amount of suppression. There's a constant amount of, trying to switch things, trying to change things, trying to be in line with everything else and not being yourself. And again, like I've mentioned before, that's where a lot of my issues have stemmed from. But going back to what I was talking about, when we look at those characters, we can really see ourselves in them. And that gives us a sense of hope and a sense of belonging in a way. Because when somebody sees that, especially when like somebody younger who is really, that's like with me, like there was shows that I had seen when I was younger, and I would see gay characters in those shows, and something resonated. It was just automatic that I resonated with that particular character. And I noticed that many times when I was younger. The movie that I mentioned in my coming out video, Prayers for Bobby, that is one of my favorite movies. And that was a movie that came out again, and it was around 2008. And I remember when that movie premiered on Lifetime. And again, the same thing with that particular character, what he was going through. He was living in a Christian family. He had a very, faith driven family, and he was struggling with his identity. And he knew that he had to sort of suppress a lot of how he was feeling in order to, not cause, any kind of stress to family and not cause any kind of stress to anybody else. And so a lot of his story, he writes in journals to be able to sort of get his emotions out. And again, that's what happens with a lot of us who are LGBTQ, is that we have to find ways, especially when you can't be open, find ways to actually be able to express yourself that allows you to release a lot of how you feel. Because, like I said, when we suppress things that is inherently natural to us and who we are, it becomes a major issue and it creates a lot of these mental health issues that happen. So, when we get rid of those types of characters, it does create an issue for somebody who is, trying to understand their identity when they don't have that sort of representation and they don't see that on screen. It becomes very difficult and it becomes like you feel like you're alone. And again, I think it's important to have those types of characters. There's so many shows that I've watched, even older shows and movies that I used to watch, that still, when I watch them, they resonate and they have this, you know you connect with that because you know exactly what that feels like and what that character is going through, even if it's not based on a true story. There's a lot of course, gay related films that are based on true stories, but even the ones that are, just stories alone, you're still able to resonate with those characters in a lot of ways. And so, again, I really wanted to discuss this because this is not something that we really talk about when we talk about, you know, sort of representation and seeing ourselves or seeing, a character representative of ourselves, in other words. So when you have that, it helps. It gives you, again, like what I mentioned, it gives you that sense of belonging in a lot of ways. When you don't feel like you have that community nearby, you know that there is somebody out there who knows what you're going through. So I just wanted to share this again. There's a ton of shows that you can check out. Like I said, Heated Rivalry is a great show. I watched it straight through. It was relatable in so many ways. It connected with me in so many ways. Queer as Folk has done the same thing. A lot of movies I've watched. Prayers for Bobby. There's so many, and again, it gives you that sense of calm, to notice that. But thank you guys once again for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I love talking about these topics. I would love to discuss and go into more intricate details on maybe some of these shows or some of these movies and sort of break down some of the different aspects of them and go over again why it matters. It matters a lot. And that's why I'm sharing these topics, because this is something that has been, you know, a lifelong thing, to have that sense of identity and discovery of who I am. And so it's important to talk about so other people know that they're not alone. So thank you guys once again for watching. I'll be doing another video pretty soon. I've been trying to upload these, sort of topic videos on Sundays. And so this is probably going to be when I'm going to upload them every week. Um, of course, outside of the fitness related content that I upload. But thank you guys once again, and I really appreciate your time. I hope that these videos give you a little bit more hope and a little bit peace throughout your journey wherever you're at. So thank you guys for watching.